And with the deep fakes, what I find it so interesting and scary is whenever your mom calls on your phone, you don't actually do a multi-factor authentication, right? So you actually don't ask your mom to actually say the passcode, because you trust that number in your phone, in her voice, confirms that it's your mom. But actually, nowadays, hackers can easily hack the number that appears. That's actually due to technology in the telephony set. Infrastructure is very old. So if you are a high skilled hacker, you might be able to spoof the number. And secondly, if you called the mom and actually recorded her voice while she was trying to talk to you or talking to you, you can easily create a deep fake and talk to other people using that voice, right? And we already had at least two bank robberies done like that.
Okay, on today's show, we have a special guest. She has her bachelor and master's in law from the University of Sao Paulo and 9 years of experience in regulatory and compliance. She has been working with privacy and information security compliance in Danish software companies in the past 4 years, and most recently with AI governance. Currently, she's a senior compliance manager at Dawn Health. Welcome to the show, Isa.
Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to talk to you both, and a very exciting team. Looking forward.
Awesome. Would you like to maybe give a bit of an intro
Yeah, sure.
to the audience of who you are and then what you've been doing currently?
Yeah, I guess you already presented me well. So I've been excited about tech since my young years, but I ended up going to become a lawyer instead. But I always go back to that themes when I can. So being dealing with digital and law in many aspects of my life, and recently with the AI being super hyped, and really organizations having to deal with AI, the AI problems, the challenges that it faces, and how is it going to be implemented. Um, yeah, is been on the focus. I've been working in Brazil as a lawyer, mainly in infrastructure sectors, but then I changed to work, especially in software companies, in the past 4 years, and that's where the focus on privacy and information security compliance came. And now, actually, uh, with AI, it's been pretty much a discussion where it's going to land, but it's a natural process that professionals working with privacy will be brought to the discussion. So that's a little bit uh, why it's also falling on my laps, and it's exciting. So it's also a pleasure to work with that. Yeah, and now the company I work with, it's called Dawn Health. It's a company that develop software, digital health solutions, and software as medical devices. I just want to state that this conversation is private, so it's not connected to my job at Dawn Health. So the opinions expressed here are purely mine and not of my employer, Dawn Health.
Oh, perfect. Uh, can I call you Isa? Is it?
Yes, please. Mm.
Isa, can you tell me a little bit how did you decide to become a lawyer? As you mentioned that you were really interested in technology, but then you ended up as a lawyer. How was this process?
Yeah, so in my high school in Brazil, you had to choose area. So which area of knowledge were you going to focus? And because I liked to read, I was good at writing. In my teenage years, we played something called role play games and board. So it's online role play games where you had to describe the actions of your players with words. So we actually got good into writing. So I was quite okay at writing, but actually I was not that bad with math. It's just that I had all these friends that they knew how to code when they were 16. So it just felt for me that if you wanted to go to engineering and tech, you had to be very geeky from start, and I definitely didn't feel like I was. So I just went to what was more my comfort zone at that time. So uh, what was more connected to humanities.
You mentioned that you worked with consulting in administrative and regulatory. antitrust and economic law in Brazil, mainly focusing on infrastructure, isn't it? How was this experience?
Um, it was well, it's very broad areas. So it's public administrative law. So it's pretty much understanding a whole sector and understanding how the law applies to those. So we had to deal with contracts with public sector. We had to deal with regulatory requirements for sectors. So what it actually equipped me is to be good in contract law, because no matter which sector you work, there is contracts applied to, and also it really helped me to learn, because every time you get a new sector is a new no whole new set of laws. So there's no university that prepares you for that. What you need to do is to understand how the framework of laws are. So pretty much what is the framework that you're working on, and know how to really get your information, uh, which is quite an interesting discussion. Information, uh, how different sectors deal with it, right? So for law, the source is very important. We need official sources. Uh, we can even dip a little bit into it, but that's kind of why you should not necessarily trust AI chatbots to give you legal advice. They not necessarily look at the right source. Yeah.
Right, makes sense. Um, do you consider EU regulations more strict in other countries?
In general,
Yeah, in general.
I think yes. I think EU, in general, if you compare with the world, yes, has more strict regulations than other places. I guess the main example is privacy, but at the same time, it also reflects a protection of fundamental rights, right? So, what is beneath the the motivation for creating a regulation is really to protect something that the market cannot protect. So if the market rules of market, so economy could really ensure that the consumers or the users of a specific service, they have their rights, or if they're fairly treated, then you would not need the law to intervene. But whenever there are cases where a specific service, a product, a capability could impact discriminate, could impact the fairness of treatment, no discrimination, safety, um, multiple aspects that protects the human rights, then it's when regulation comes to actually interfere on the unbalanced unbalanced powers in the relationship, right? So the clear example that we have is consumer law, right? You protect the consumer's rights because in theory the corporations will not have the incentives to do so, and if they did not have a law to abide by. If and whenever they write contracts, then if they could, they can always impose their own terms and conditions. Why would they impose rules that are stricter to themselves, right? So then you have a sector that protects someone, the consumer. So it's what you're seeing now with AI, right? Intention to protect something that potentially would not be protected without regulation.
Yeah, it started with GDPR a couple of years ago, right? This whole movement in EU, and then of course now with the AI Act, which we're going to cover a little bit later on in the episode.
Yeah, AI regulations, they've been around for since the EU was sorry, the EU regulations been around since the EU is being established as a uh, um, uh, what's it called, the union of
Like an
countries. Yeah. So for instance, there's the liability act. It's from the 85s. I guess what's particular from GDPR is that actually created a movement that other countries actually start having the same law. So in that sense, EU kind of started something, right? So of course we had that is common in history, that Roman Empire suddenly has a Roman law talking about civil law, and then suddenly all countries have civil law. But this movement of a country starting to regulate something and then that being regulated to other places, it's really, really something you can see in the GDPR. as having EU in the central place of it, right? So EU having potentially being the first ones to create a legislation that now is being copied and replicated throughout all the countries. And with AI, they're also being pretty much the first comers, right? So not many countries yet have their laws approved, but there are many coming.
What would you say is your relationship with AI today? And do you use it on a regular basis? And if so, which tools do you use?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Um, I think as a personally, I am curious about it. I'm also a little afraid, to be honest. I think it's super exciting, the possibilities that it gives, but I'm also a little bit concerned about the risks, really. And I'm not sure we'll have the tools to mitigate those risks, or even if we will be able to know those risks beforehand, right? Uh, and actually, it's quite interesting because I think my relationship, like knowing AI is there, it's also shaping how I see other areas such as social media, because suddenly the processing of your data with AI, it's what it's crazy, right? So the capabilities of processing data, it's what AI can make a difference from previous software or other algorithms. So suddenly big data is easy to be processed. So you've been out there putting your pictures in social media, your daughters, your family's pictures, and now you have a new technology that can do a lot of stuff with it. So I'm also a little concerned, but I have to say that I'm a user. So I do use ChatGPT privately. I'm also very aware to not give too much context. So whenever I talk to it, I think I really make it conversational. I try to give as little information I can, but then of course you need to give more to have the value of the output, right? Um, and then I
And
sometimes play with these image generators. I think it's
yeah,
quite interesting that you can prompt use with an input of words have an image created. But I really think we're in the baby times of AI, right? There's much coming. Yeah. How do you see it? Do you also use it?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
we're both heavy users of of AI. Yeah, ChatGPT. When I open my browser, ChatGPT is the first one who opens automatically. Then Gmail. That's the tools that I use regular basis. And
Yeah, we had ChatGPT Pro basically. We're
Okay.
basically using it helps us a lot with the whole podcast because it's it can generate show notes. It helps a lot in saving time, right?
Yes.
So, and of course, we created like GPTs specific for specific tasks. For example, show notes. Also, even the scripts, it can help us with the scripts for the episodes. So it's
yeah,
without that, we would it would take like triple the time.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't use it for legal research. So as I mentioned, these are
mhm,
is where I think that if you want to use it, you should use just potentially to have a first grasp of things, but should not be your final source. But it's quite good at writing clauses, legal clauses for contracts. So sometimes if you want to make a clause better, it's not that bad. But I mean, again, I'm a lawyer, so I can revise those. Uh, but it's quite impressive that it can do that.
I think it's interesting the models that you can train. So you can actually create your own database for the AI. I think that's the way companies are trying to use it. Like I have seen in
Yeah,
a company that I have worked.
it's the reg,
And
right? That you can create a database that the chatbot can actually fetch data just from it, right? To answer questions. I think this is a very
yeah,
good use case. It would be great. I would love as a lawyer to have a tool that only good sources.
yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the best scenario because sometimes we just write like some documents that are like kind of standardized. So we use the same paragraphs or just modify a little bit. But if a machine can do that and take it from the source and put it in a document and then just check it and change what is need to be changed,
And
I think that's
reference the
a
source. There will be it
yeah.
will be giving ideas here for people who wants to develop.
I think that's the I think that's the biggest thing for me, or what prevents this from happening is mostly like privacy, right? With privacy issues, because most of these things are actually being reused to train these models, or it's going to a server somewhere. And I guess the moment we have something that can be maybe stored locally, it might be favored for so in some use cases, right? Especially because when we're talking, it's not just private data, but also competitive advantage of companies today is that data, right? So is
Yes.
that the thing that they're sharing? So if that is basically used to train models elsewhere, somebody might get that information by doing some sort of request at some point because it's learning from it. I
Yeah.
guess that's the big deal.
Yeah. So for IP rights as well, right? So it's both privacy but IP rights. If you consider the biggest providers of chats right now, they have scraped the internet to train their modules, and information has been out there for us to read. So uh, IP rights laws, the laws that protect intellectual property, they've been made in a way that that humans, whenever they read information, they don't need a license. So you don't need a license to read information that is available publicly on the internet. Um, but you would need a license, or you need authorization, and you need to attribute to the author whenever you refer to that information. So it's quite interesting because what the AI modules have done, they also have read. It's just that reading here has another consequence, right? So it's not just a person reading; it's a machine that has learned. And does this then mean that that information lives in the module? Yes or no? But we have seen modules spitting out personal data, and then spitting out exact quotes of books or content that is copyrighted to someone else. And then there's the whole discussion of the companies that owns the systems, the AI systems. They say this is actually just the best recommendation. It's a probabilistic output, so it's not necessarily the same uh, quoting that it was trained on. But can you really tell the difference? Because nowadays, whenever you go to a copyright law, you actually check, okay, 10% of this is exactly the same as this. Then you copy it. You made a copy. So that's how you. So what is interesting about AI, and that I think it also brings us to understand why there is this whole also crisis in our understanding of law, is because it challenges our assumptions of how the word works, and that's what builds the that's all what the laws and regulations and our customs are built upon, in expectations of how the world exists. So AI is coming and it's bringing different things in the game, right? So we have not expected a tool that could process huge amount of data. We have not expected a tool that could um, uh, read and then actually be able to replicate with that precision, right? So when I buy a book, I don't need to get a license to just read. I just bought the book, right? uh, but in AI, you're not only reading, you're reading, but you're being able to recite it. So that's what is super interesting. And also by scraping the internet, the system necessarily also processed personal data. So there also comes the question: is it going to spit out personal data?
I guess it's a very interesting that it is just very interesting that most of the laws or regulations that we have today are reflecting how the human brain works, right? So basically, how or at least rely on the flawed human brain and our flawed memory. So we're not going to be able to completely, unless we copy paste something from a book, we're not going to be able to exactly like you get the essence, but you're not going to replicate that exactly. So it's more up to interpretation. But these machines, they are a massive library of perfect citations. So you know, the laws are definitely not adjusted to or adapted to that, right? So I guess that's bring us to the topic of AI and regulation, right? So how do you see, in your opinion, AI versus regulation? Are we ready? Is it, you know, is regulation AI gonna be enough? I mean, it's two complex questions in one, but like,
Sure. I think it's important that we try. So I believe we are taking good steps. It's quite interesting to see the evolution. So the concerns about AI are coming from the industry. So the first ethical letters and declarations that AI needed control are coming from the industry, really, from tech companies, from um, automotive companies seeing AI use in automated cars, what's called autonomous cars. So it is a good sign that the industry sees the need for regulation, and the technology evolves super fast, and the law always behind. So it's expected, and that's how it always is, right? So first you need something happening in the world for the regulations to actually see the need for regulating. So we should not expect something differently. And I'm quite optimistic that we are being fast. So if you see, uh, we had the first international documents, international treaties, non-binding treaties in 2021 about AI, and now 3 years later, we have massive amount of countries already discussing bills of law, creating their own understanding if they need regulation, yes or no. But for instance, the OECD uh, uh, AI principles, all the countries that are abiding by it, they are really discussing new laws. So it is coming. What I think it might be not enough. It's the scope where the laws are touching upon. So what we are not seeing covered is, and it's very common out of scope, is the use of AI for military uses. So this is not in scope of most of the laws. So actually, the US is discussing a bill for use of AI as a national security, but autonomous weapons is not there. So no one is talking about that, and it's being used, right? We all know that it's already in use, some of it, some of the technology, and if you actually go back and look at history, like uh, First and Second World War, uh, the developments in technology, they were done heavily on military, right? So uh,
yeah,
I guess the issue is we are seeing the risk of this tool. We are implementing regulations for the private sector, but the first implementers and the ones who have a massive investments, massive national investments, and who have a lot of freedom to do stuff, will be in the scope of military. And we're not seeing a lot of control there. And it's, to be honest, I don't expect that it will come, because it's very sensitive topic. So normally it falls within national sovereignty controls. Um, each country is fighting to see who's going to have AI sovereignty as well. So we live in Denmark. Here in Denmark, there was just been a launch of a Gefion computer. I don't know if you've seen, but it's a
yeah,
computer that is to be processing here. So to ensure that the companies developing AI systems could actually use that technology. So it is also an example of countries fighting for AI sovereignty, right? So and so exactly, the everything that touches upon military, it's probably not going to be covered in the laws. What the countries they are committing to are the respect of fundamental rights, but it's very high level, right? We already accept that in case of war, There
I,
is
I
a
think there's also, sorry,
yeah, no, please.
I think there was also, it's also hard. I can imagine that it's hard to regulate something that we don't know. We're basically scratching the surface yet of what this thing can do, right? We don't actually don't know if it's actually going to be this powerful that everybody's saying, and also the ramifications, right? It and also, I mean, if it becomes self-aware and intelligent, the assuming that it will exponentially be more intelligent as by itself. So I mean, honestly, it's impossible to control something that we don't understand because it's more intelligent than us. So how to regulate the potential of that?
Yeah,
um,
it's super challenging question. I guess what regulations are doing now is actually to regulate what they can see somehow. So it's already expected that we're that will be parts of it that we're not foreseeing. I actually had I participated into an event that the one of the presenters, they actually focus the need for us to have proximate objectives to deal with, because we are dealing with the unknown very soon, right? So potentially we should focus on what we know, so and be able to shift quickly. And that's not necessarily how the regulations work, because it takes a lot of time to approve and etc. But at least uh, I guess the biggest concerns of AI we're not mitigating yet. What I think it's quite interesting, the proposals for instance, what EU AI Act is proposing is actually the control through process, and I think that's a very beneficial one. So you don't know yet all the risks, but you ensure that the process will be able to identify the risks. So you ensure documentation, you ensure stakeholder engagement, you ensure that risks were assessed, you ensure testing, you ensure verification, and you ensure that someone will have to make an impact assessment of fundamental rights. So you can guess it right, but at least you have to ask yourself the question: does this AI poses risks, and what are the mitigation that are being implemented? Um, so in that sense, I believe that that's what we can do now. We can create the processes that will surface the risks. Uh, but again, if it gets there is this understand that the singularity moment, it will just happen, right? So when after it happened, you cannot go back, and science fiction views of it, then yeah. But I guess there's many other risks that can happen before that. Most likely what could happen is that AI will make a decision, and a human will then uh, make that decision enforceable, right? So what we need to ensure as of now, and I really believe that, is the right controls for we can foresee, for what we can foresee. Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about the EU AI Act. And what are the key elements, do you think, in an easy way, actually, to how can we understand the EU Act, or how do you perceive that?
Yeah, so EU has enacted the EU AI Act to regulate AI in the EU. Um, so it actually applies to multiple types of AI systems, but there is what is important. There is a classification of what AI is, because I believe there is still a lot of discussions. And what the AI Act is defining as AI is a technology that perceives by perceiving goals, infers. So there's this word inference that is very important, and I think will be very useful to define what is an algorithm that is not AI, or at least doesn't apply the AI Act. You can discuss if it's AI or not, right? Like decision trees, and AI. And then it actually classify risks. So what the EU AI Act is aiming to do is to have different frameworks depending on the risk of AI. So there is a high what they call higher risk AIs, that are mainly the AI systems or AI modules that can pose. So for general purpose AI, it's what can cause systemic risks, and it's still a little. We're not sure yet what general purpose AI means. There is a definition that is it's the AI that is not narrow, so it's not performing a single task but can perform multiple tasks. But we're not sure if that means that ChatGPT is one of them, or
Isn't is it similar to an AI agent, right? So basically, that can multitask, or it has a goal, and then it will go and autonomously take some decisions to actually reach that goal. But that's, in my perspective, that's still one layer below AGI, because there's this. That's all you hear about this tech moguls, let's say, talking about AGI, that we're closer to AGI, we're going to reach AGI soon, etc. But what is actually AGI, right? Is And what does that mean? Because if it's actually native or more intelligent than us, then how do we ensure that we have control of something that we don't understand, right?
completely. And those are the ones that the law are is so the regulation is saying that is high risk. And then together with those, it's every AI system that is actually part of a product that is already regulated due to product safety. So, for instance, um, medical devices, toys. There's a critical infrastructure. So there's multiple sectors that are already regulated due to the value they bring or the safety perspectives they have already. And then, of course, if AI is present on them, they are in high risk. Uh, and for those, there's also a classification of players. So it's the whole supplier chain of AI. The EU AI Act defines responsibilities on that supply chain. But there's also obligations for what they call low risk or certain types of AI, and that's mainly transparency obligations. So it's very important to uh, for any company actually putting into the market a AI system, even if it's low risk, to give the right transparency. Um, and that comes into actually describing how the module was created, how the module was trained, um, identifying potential limitations. So some where you can see there already an example is in model cards. So existing modules, they have something called module cards. It's their privacy policy for AI. So that's how the transparency obligations are into play. And then finally, there are also the prohibited AI. So it's the AI that can not exist. So because they actually create discrimination. So discrimination for hiring people, discrimination. So if you use AI to actually do sentiment analysis of biometrics, that's prohibited. And I actually don't remember all the list, but as of now, what is important for companies is really to not fall onto those, right? So to ensure that they're not either using AI for a prohibited purpose or creating systems, AI systems in the prohibited areas.
How broad it is this? Because if you think about the algorithms that social media use, they kind of interpret your eye movements, and do you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
and they kind of play with your, yeah, they kind of play with your feelings in a way, because you were scrolling and then you don't know if it's, is it included, this kind of a technology as a AI, or is it a different type of technology?
So the ensuring that your system appears in a fairness way, it's already part of many other laws, right? So
Yeah.
either it doesn't matter the technology you use, right? AI is a type of technology. What you're doing
Yeah.
is what is actually being regulated. So the EU AI Act actually is limiting the use of the technology to these uses. But of course, if systems are already creating um, features that are unfair, so that you could potentially, and I'm not saying that the ones you mentioned necessarily are the ones, but let's say that a system is already creating functionalities that could potentially mean that some type of unfairness is being created. There's a lot of laws that already would apply there, right? So in the US, you have the Federal Trade uh, FTC. Yeah, what is it called again? No, yeah, it's FTC.
Yeah, the
They,
FTC, yeah,
yeah,
that's basically suing Google and sue a lot of companies in the US in the last couple of months.
yeah, so they protect privacy, they protect security, and they protect consumers. So in general, so uh,
Yeah.
they already signaled that they're also going to control AI for fairness. So what they control is the competition market, right? So to ensure that there is fairness in the competition market, it's the Federal Trade Commission. That's the name, FTC.
Mm.
Yeah. So they already signaled that any system, any technology will be under their umbrella, but AI most likely. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
And then, but what we have seen like some actually we talked in the podcast like in a previous episode about AI scams, and actually there was a big scam I think that happened in Hong Kong if I'm not right wrong. Uh, how do you see that the law is covering the cyber crimes, and is there any different approach of using like for example deep fakes and this kind of technology?
yeah. So those are one of the prohibited uses. So the whole transparency obligation, it's there to actually avoid this. Um, so you cannot use AI in a way that you impair the judgment of a human to understand who they are dealing with. So how is this going to be in practice? Is it's very recommended that systems actually flag when they're dealing with AI, yes or no. And now there's been Google. I know they're developing a way to watermark AI. So this is one of the ways to actually mitigate to have watermarked, um, or even to state, right. So not to let the users of technology understand that they're dealing with a technology, not with a person, right? They're not talking necessarily with a human whenever they're talking to the technology. And with the deepfake, is a little bit of the same. So, but it's super challenging because, of course, those committing crimes, what they do is actually go against the regulation, right? And with the deep fakes, what I find it so interesting and scary is that it actually changes our it needs to change our way to behaving into what we don't trust, right? So I guess the one of examples that for me is clearly is the voice deep fake. So whenever your mom calls on your phone, you don't actually do a multi-factor authentication, right? So you actually don't ask your mom to actually say the passcode, because you trust that that number in your phone, in her voice, confirms that it's your mom. But actually nowadays, hackers can easily hack the number that appears. So that's due to that's actually due to technology in the telephony sector. Telephony infrastructure is very old. It's not that the messaging is not encrypted. So if you are a high skilled hacker, you might be able to spoof the number. And secondly, if you called the mom and actually recorded her voice while she was trying to talk to you or talking to you, you can easily create a deepfake and talk to other people using that voice, right? And we already had at least two, I don't know more, but we had two bank robberies done like that. So
Seriously?
CEOs have called their banks to make transfers. Uh, and the bank so whenever a CEO has a very strong relationship with their bank manager, they make transactions with a call. So not necessarily they, let's say it's a good customer, right? A lot of money. You don't even need to go through the system, put your pass. You can call your manager and they will make it for you. So in 2 cases, there was money being transferred to accounts illegally due to deepfake voicing.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And then
But
it also raises the question, like, is my image going to be used in a deepfake in the future, so something can be claimed about me? So we are entering this phase of misinformation, right? That AI, unfortunately, is a tool that can create that. So
it can potentialize it, right? Basically, it's the scalability of, use it for bad motives is huge.
definitely, but you can also use it for the good, right? So there is also, for instance, AI for cybersecurity, right? It's a very positive use of AI, and is actually to fight that, right? So to fight, it's just that you need both to have the incentives to evolve at the same time, right? The good users have to catch up often.
How do you say is a good AI use case for cybersecurity? How AI has been used to actually fight against this, scams, for example?
AI tools, they can be used for detection of anomalies and detection of events that are not normal. So normally, let's say you are a company that you have a monitoring setup. You track events, logs, actions of users in the system. Um, After you have defined all the logs, you need to actually create alerts, right? So you need to create what from these events are out of the normality that I should look into it to actually see if there is a malicious intent. Malicious intent. Um, Sometimes AI is better than humans to capture, to detect anomalies. They can see patterns that we could not. So that's one of the possible use cases of AI. I'm sure it's already used some cases for some vulnerability scanning tools out there. Um, so that's one of them. Spam detection also. So and that's another one that AI also is in the other side, because now um, yeah, you can create like phishing emails with no spelling mistakes, right? The new phishing, we're entering the phishing email area, where to spot a phishing, in the past we said, oh, look for grammar errors. We don't say that anymore, because AI is very good at writing. They are not going to make grammar errors. They're not going to make spelling mistakes. um,
What would you recommend then, given this that we're facing this nowadays? Like, is there any particular thing to look at for to identify like phishing scam or spam on your email?
yeah, the recommendation for phishing, I think maybe the spelling errors failed. It's not there anymore, but you still can trust that if you are receiving a message that is urgent, that you were not expecting, so there is it's asking something from you, potentially has a link, and you didn't expect that message, then you should potentially doubt it, right? So uh, again, looking for the right sources. Is this coming from a provider that has a web page with login? So go to that web page, log in, see if there is any message in the system, not in your email, right? um, and really doubt any urgency. So typical phishing emails, right? Like click this link because we need this by like the CEO saying we need this by the end of the day. That's creating urgency. So are you sure it's coming from the right source, right? So, and of course, you can still look in the links. If you put the mouse on top, you can see often what the link is with this tidy URL, or the URL that get reduced. Don't trust them, because you cannot know what is coming from.
Yeah, it's masking the URL.
Exactly.
You should only trust the prince that wants to donate like $1 million for you
Yeah,
and
of
transfer
course.
automatically.
The Prince of Nigeria.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. And of course, don't pay bills that just comes to you, right? So because there is this huge thing that finance departments, they just start paying bills that actually are not the truth, like it's just transferring money to someone's account because yeah, they lack the right controls of accountability to check that that bill needed to be paid. But this is basic finance control, right? uh, yeah.
And do you think that, what are the characteristics of a trustworthy AI? Let's say, do you have anything? For example, you said the watermarks and stuff. Do you know any other things that they're working on to protect us? Let's say.
Yeah, so trustworthy AI is like a principle, right? So when you see the definitions, it's very high level, but it has to be safe, it has to be secure, it has to be unbiased, it has to be fair, um it has to be functioning properly functioning, and privacy enhanced. So this is one of the uh, but there are ways to do it, and I think if we focus on the ways, it's and again it's still high level, but can give a little more tips on really practical implementation. Uh, is it amplifying human agency? So it's giving humans more power. Is it actually providing a positive impact in humans conditions, in the planet conditions, if you look for also climate change impacts? uh, is it actually if you cannot explain fully, can you at least explain how it was developed and what you found out when you're doing your testing? So, and that again is admitting flaws, right? So we are in a phase where we have to admit flaws. um, is the AI system clearing its intended use in a clear manner? So can you really understand what is this intended for, so you don't use it in a way that is not intended? And then is there a feedback loop? So I guess this is another good mark. Like, can you provide feedback of, is there's monitoring on the output? And that it's quite interesting because we, like, from privacy perspective, you don't want the tools to actually see what you're prompting and talking to the tool, but actually you need that because that's what's going to provide material for actually understanding if the system is functioning how it should be, right? um, and then are you involving the right stakeholders when you're creating the AI? So we have the example of Amazon. In the old days, they created an AI tool um, for selecting employees, and it was actually just trained in CVs of men. So it ended up it was not selecting any women for the jobs. So maybe the stakeholders involved in the development didn't consider that, right? So involving the right people also in the development to see their point of view, it's also something that we also do it in privacy. It's part of data protection impacts assessments, and it should also be done in AI high risk assessments.
There's a lot of biases that comes with AI, depending on the biases of the data they are trained, right? And
And
yeah,
it's
how do you see
yeah,
that?
it's super interesting because the human world is biased, right? Like, we need to accept that bias is something that exists. So, and not biases are necessarily wrong. So you can create some type of selection that is fair, right? So you can say, oh, okay, I'm just going to give loan for you if you have um, uh, this amount of salary in percentage to the loan I can give. This is a bias, right? Or this is a decision made in terms of people's qualities. So let's say salary, but it's considered fair. What is what is problematic? It's when AI is biased towards something that is unfair. So if it's actually putting gender, ethnic, um, race, uh, discussions or human characteristics into the discussion when that should not be part of the decision, right? But that's what is super challenging because AI looks into the whole value of AI is actually looking into things that we're not as human looking, right? But it comes back again to the quality of the data. So it needs to be trained in good data, It needs to be tested in equally good data. And I really believe in monitoring. I think we're probably not going to make it right at start, but we should uh, at least acknowledge the flaws early and potentially start with low risk, right? Where the risks of being wrong are not so big, and learn with the process.
Yeah. Talking about the future of AI, do you think more optimistic or more doomer in regards of AI?
It's a hard question, right? I think I'm optimistic just for the sake of not being able to be other. Or I think if you are a doomer, you go to live in a farm, right? And throw out your computer. And I mean, I would have a hard time. I'm an extremist, so I think if I would be a doomer, I would have to go very extreme there. So I feel like I am optimistic, but I am also skeptical. Again, I think we need to be careful. The risks are real, really, and not necessarily the controls are in place to avoid them.
It's hard because even if you are going to the to a property like a rural property, you
They're
still need
super
technology.
technological. Yeah, they're super technology. And actually, AI for agriculture is one of the beautiful examples where AI can be used, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, I think we need to be cautious, and I think I whenever in the 90s when we started using the internet, we didn't know that what we could post, right? So we didn't know how to use the internet. Many were actually teenager kids, and now you see people that actually have overposted and probably have to delete things they posted when they were 16. And I believe our like the kids of today, they are a little more aware of the consequences of exposure in the internet. So this shows a curve of how to of our society actually learning to use a tool, right? So learning the consequences and um, of using the internet in general. I guess for AI, it will probably be the same. We actually not know. We're not so sure yet. What are the risks? So there will be probably some bad uses of it, or uses that creates risks that we have not foreseen. And then I have to be optimistic that the risks that they actually become a concrete fact. Let's hope that they are small enough that we can mitigate them. Um,
The toughest part is that if you look back on how do you usually learn and that we need to move on or restrict something or regulate something really bad needs to happen, right? I think was it happened with the aviation industry, for example. There was a lot of accidents which was totally not normal, and then strict regulations came, and then now it's very rare when there's an accident, and if there is one or two accidents next to each other, there's something really wrong going on. So so that's the part that worries me a bit, is that something really bad needs to happen with AI for us to just wake up and know we need to really do something about. But maybe when we're talking about intelligence, maybe it might be too late.
Exactly. I really hope that we have learned something by just having started the regulation now in many fronts. And it's actually it's we have learned from product safety in general. So it's building on top of product safety regulation. So some knowledge we have there. Uh, but again, the difference here is the impact. Generalization, the impact could be very broad, right? Um, and really unforeseeable. And again, the areas being regulated not all. So uh, what will mean for the areas that are not regulated then? Can they then be a place where risk will be concrete, right? It is super challenging. I think what is positive is that there is a huge focus on this topic, right? So countries, a lot of countries are engaged into discussing this globally in international forums, um, and quite a lot of bills are being discussed right now. Uh,
So that's a good sign. The
Definitely.
conversation is happening at least, because it as I think this is also another challenge, and I would like to hear you about it. There's of course EU regulation, which is basically trying to standardize a lot of different countries' regulations, right? But then you have multiple countries and their own regulations. And when we talk about AI, it's it can easily go globally. We're not talking just to something that maybe one country will maybe spearhead it, because you can still use some open source models and grow them in different, or train them in different ways. So um, yeah, how do you see that? uh, how to solve that? Is it maybe some sort of United Nations regulatory body that can actually look into this in a global scale, or just countries talking to each other is enough?
Yeah, that's a good question, and somehow the fact that this is being discussed in the treaties level, so internationally, there are countries, group of countries grouping themselves to discuss AI, and they are agreeing in non-binding agreements. We had the first binding agreement coming this year with the Council of Europe Framework Convention for AI, and actually, Council of Europe is different than the EU, so other countries can abide by it. So that's it's one of the ways where more countries can agree, uh, and of course it's high level, right? So it depends on each member state implementing what they have agreed, but that's part of binding treaties that they will do that. Um, I guess another thing that can potentially be helping the unification of laws in this is the market, really, the market lobbying for it, because AI systems, they will be sold across the globe, right? So there is an interest that the complexity is standardized. We have already now a uh, uh, ISO, so the International Standardization uh, Framework for AI is published, or AI governance. So this is a way of we're going towards standardization, because if you are to produce a product that can be sold throughout the globe, this is for the AI produced by companies for users or companies, you need to abide by multiple laws that will be complex. So they have the incentives to lobby for a unification of regulation, right? We know that not always that happens. For privacy is one of the examples. There is a lot of asymmetries in privacy laws throughout the globe. Um, Liability also, there is two regimes. There is strict liability countries, non-strict liability or fault liability countries. So not necessarily these initiatives will ensure standardization, uh, but they can push towards it, right?
Yeah. I think we're running out of time. But it's been great talking to you. I think I only have one more question in regards to maybe more looking into the future, and maybe what do you recommend as well? Um, because we've been talking about it here in this podcast that we are trying to encourage people to use more AI and to learn these tools, right? So, what would be your recommendation in terms of AI, and where do you see the technology evolving in the next couple of years?
Yeah. So my recommendation is buy a license. So AI gets not. That's how you ensure that the AI modules will not be trained by your data. Some modules allow you to deny. You can deny the right, the permission to be trained. But so first of all, get a AI that you pay for. So you are not the product. You are not the product, right? Like your data is not the product, but you are paying for it, and use it, because there's no way back. So we are gonna use it. So if I believe that to be efficient in today's market, you probably will need it. and you really need to see what is it good for. And I think in each profession will depend on a test and error a little bit. So yeah, I definitely recommend people play with it. Um, but yeah, with a paid subscription, and of course, you don't need to put everything there. You can put your diary. I read someone that put all their diaries there, and so the AI know who they're talking about with. But I think that's definitely not what I would do. Uh, so really use the tool in your benefit, right? Like how the tool can help you with your task. So you don't necessarily need to give the tool personal data. You can scrape that out, right? So you can scrape details out if you are concerned about the processing of that part. So that's what I do, and I actually recommend people would do.
Awesome.
Respect.
Can I ask how do you see it? How do you see AI and regulation?
I think it's really important. I think it's something that we need to discuss and actually put boundaries, because everything has boundaries in our world.
Yeah,
Um, what concerns me a little bit is the people that will not follow the laws anyways. So, for example, the to commit crimes and stuff like that. So they will probably take this technology and use without the regulations. So that's the only concern that I have.
yeah,
But I think we need to put some boundaries in big techs and big companies, because if we don't do that, then it's kind of concerning for me, this topic, if we don't put some boundaries.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think crime to identify crime will also get easier with AI. But there's also it's a dilemma, right? Because that means you're giving countries, national countries, more power then also, right? Whenever
Yeah,
their way to enforce the law with special powers is strengthened, then can mean that you are the next, right?
yeah.
More surveillance, right?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, even the government should be regulated. They should have boundaries too. Like,
Yeah, yeah. For that one, the AI Act actually has a whole set of rules of the use of facial recognition for
mhm.
identifying crimes, and you need a court order. So it's not acceptable that you just track all the time. So that's not acceptable under the AI Act. It's one of the prohibited ones. Uh, but with a court order, you can. So that means
Yeah,
they will have the technology ready to do it, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, at least it has some. At least it has some limitations.
Yeah,
Like it's not
Yeah,
completely like rogue. Like let's say, I think in China they basically have cameras everywhere, and then just facial recognition everywhere.
yeah. The,
yeah,
the
it's
question
quite
is,
scary.
So
if they use it only for crimes, it's fine. But then they can track you, everything that you're doing. So that's the kind of balance that we need to understand, isn't it? Like, if they are using to track you, everything that you're doing, and or if they are tracking only the crimes that you're committing, let's say. So,
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
the
Are you gonna how are you gonna feel to make a protest, right? A political protest if you know that there is facial recognition controls in your country. Would you feel you have the same freedom of speech, or is
yeah,
those type of things, right? It comes into play. Um, Another one that for me it's quite interesting. We use biometrics as passwords, right? So you use for your phone, it's gonna be easy to hack so soon. And then
yeah,
when it becomes, are you gonna change your face? Because you can change your password, right? But your face you cannot. So
yeah. That's true.
yeah, wow, that's true. Yeah, with the deep fake, you can. Wow.
And even the
yeah,
cars, for example, autonomous cars, they can be hacked. So, for example, if you enter in your car and then it's wrecked, and then you will bring it to a place that you were not expecting, I don't know, you can be hijacked, like with your own car. So this kind of
yeah. And the level of
questions.
information that the cars can gather from you, it's insane, right? They know where you
Yeah,
go. They know what time you leave. It's quite they. there is a lot of information that can be gathered, and some of them are gathering. Yeah,
The same as robots, we have an episode about the Elon Musk robot. And then we were discussing exactly that. If they're already wrecking this robots that cleans the house, and and they were kind of how to say it, like they were talking to the dogs and making like a lot of bad stuff. With a small robot, can you imagine with a big robot in your house? What they can see, what they can hear, what they can do actually with you. So that's the big question: how can we regulate that? Like is it
yeah,
being stored? All your data being stored in the robot, or is it sending to Tesla? I don't know. So this kind of boundaries that need to be put in place before we have this this spreading technology.
definitely, definitely, and transparency, right? So as a user, you want to be able to know what's happening, and I know we normally don't read all the privacy policies out there,
Yeah.
but for instance, I don't know if you ever bought these DNA tests. Then you read it, right? Then you read it. Like, I hope as a privacy professional, I read, but that one I'm thinking, I think everyone who buys those kits will read it, right? So how much will start having to do that, right?
Yeah,
Then he has bought
maybe
it.
it's gonna be. Yeah, I did. Maybe it's gonna be more and more necessary to be aware of this as things get very muddy, right? In terms of what you can trust and what you cannot.
Definitely.
But it was super cool.
Thank you so much for having me here. It was a very interesting to talk to you.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks for accepting the invitation and have this conversation about regulation with us.
Yeah, let's see the next steps. What's gonna happen?
Yeah, thank you very much for being here with us and to talk so much good things and about regulation, because we always discuss about regulations and we are both kind of uh, non-specialists, so we lack a lot about regulations and law. So it's really good to have your perspective.
Great to have you here and with us. And then, yeah, where people can find you online if they want to learn more about you.
I guess in LinkedIn, I have yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so that's probably the best place to find me. Yeah, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Oh, we'll put it in the link in the show notes. Awesome.
Thank you. Obrigada.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It's free and helps us a lot. This way, it can help us also reach new listeners. Oh, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to stay up to date on our latest episodes. If you have any questions for us, reach out to us at hello@humanAIXP.com or connect with us on Instagram. Thanks for listening. See you next week.